Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cultivating Culture Shifts. My name is Lee Perry, and I'm interviewing incredible women from Moms Demand Action, talking about the need for the necessary gun reforms in the state of Florida in order to really mitigate a lot of the violence that we're seeing in our communities. Trigger warning, we really want to make sure that you're listening responsibly and that you know there's very challenging themes that we're going to be talking about during this interview. But I also just want to say thank you so much for watching and paying attention. This is a crisis, and we really need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to advocate for gun reform and for Moms Demand Action and all of the incredible women and men behind the movement. Thank you for your service. Hi, everyone. This is Lee Perry, and I am so excited to interview some incredible women from Moms Demand Action, many who I have met along the campaign trail and in my local community advocating against gun violence and hoping to see progress with gun reform here in the state of Florida and all throughout the country. So I'm very excited to introduce my friends, and I'll start with Linda. Linda, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're a part of Moms Demand Action.
Sure. Thank you, Lee. We really appreciate this opportunity to let us shine a light on Moms Demand Action and what we do and why we do it. Again, my name is Linda Coffin, and I've been with Moms Demand Action only about 4 years. And I was a foster mom for many years, and that started me on a new path to see what some of our children live through and what they are drawn to. And many times it does have to do with gun issues and gun violence. Then I also lived in West Palm Beach when Parkland happened, and my husband's coworker lost his daughter. And right after that, we moved to Florida, and I said, I need to get involved with Moms Demand Action. And I met this incredible group in Orlando. They have been wonderful and very supportive. I did legislative work for foster children previously, so now I am the legislative lead in Orlando. So thank you again for letting us share what we do.
Of course. Thank you for sharing. Fiona, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Fiona, Aunt Shannon, and I guess what I grew up in New Zealand, and so in a country where even the police don't carry guns. So I've always had a problem with the gun culture in this country, and it was sort of when my daughter graduated from college, and she was teaching in a Title I school in Jacksonville, and she was teaching 8th grade, and with Teach for America, and she had kids in her class that were followed home and a gun put to their head in 8th grade, and guns, on campus and what have you. And I volunteered up there with the kids, and I realized I needed to do something more than what I was doing, that there were too many kids that, weren't getting opportunities that my kids had. So at that time, I started volunteering at the Boys and Girls Club. And it was also around the same time as the Pulse shootings. And it made me realize I got to do something with the guns. And so I joined League of Women Voters, their gun safety group with Patty Brigham. And I did work with them, and we fought to get the assault weapons ban petition on the Florida ballot, which we failed. We didn't get enough signatures. And then right around that same time, I think I joined Moms Demand in Seminole County, and then in Orange County, we kind of worked together. And because I felt that there was power in numbers, and our power was these red T-shirts. You get recognized, and it gives you a voice. And I just feel like my main fight is that I just want other kids to have the opportunities my kids had. And I just feel like so many kids are guns and gun violence are just affecting too many children and too many people in this country. And it's something that we can solve so easily. And we need to do it.
Thank you for sharing that story. I really appreciate it. We'll dive even deeper into your backgrounds and your stories as well. Danielle, if you want to share a little bit about yourself and why you joined Moms Demand Action.
Yeah, my name is Danielle Vallette, and I was the local group leader for Orlando for a few years. And Sonia is going to be taking over. And then I'm going to take a little bit of a step back, but still be very, very involved with our local group. But I joined Moms Demand Action after the Parkland shooting as well. I just remember feeling very helpless when I would take my son to school. And I remember thinking, if I do something and I'm trying and something happens to him, at least I tried. So I just felt like I needed to be doing something, and found this group, and just joined all of these amazing people, mostly women. Just making a difference. And like Fiona touched on, the power of the red shirts, recognition, and this massive movement of all volunteers across this entire country, and what we've been able to accomplish in the last 10 years that Moms has been in existence has been just truly incredible to experience, especially on the federal level. Having the first bipartisan gun bill passed at the federal level was massive last year. So it just feels like this is a movement that we're all part of, and it's growing and evolving, and it's making a difference in the past few years, which is gives me a lot of hope. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And, everything I've read has basically said that it's the grassroots movements on every level that really pushed that across the finish line, because, the NRA has always been the loudest voice in the room in previous years, but for the first time, I guess, in this past legislative cycle, the grassroots movements have built up such momentum across the country that even Republican representatives go home and they cannot avoid the large movements of constituencies that are starting to speak back and speak out. So that's really awesome. And I'm excited to dive deeper into that. Sonia, if you want to talk a little bit about yourself and why you're here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lee. So my name is Sonia Ledger, and like Danielle said, I will be stepping into the role of local group lead for, we call it Central Florida because we kind of group Seminole, Orange, and Osceola. I actually, my journey with moms started right after Parkland. I am an educator. I'm an Orange County public school teacher, and I have been for 18 years. This is my 18th year. And after Parkland, I just felt like not one more, not another school. And, I've been around the education system for this long, knowing the types of things that happen within our own classrooms and within the hallways. And it just scared me to death that we continue to sort of just push everything under the rug and continue on and, send thoughts and prayers, and then the cycle starts all over again. And so after Parkland, I decided to join. Actually, I remember my first meeting was at a church soon after Parkland, and it was a standing room only. And I just felt so empowered by the women that were running this group that I just felt like this is the right place for me to be. And it was the right place for me to dig in and do the work that I knew as an educator I could bring to the table. I will tell you that ever since Parkland and the amount of drills that happen on a regular basis, I actually have a little bit of a PTSD when it comes to being in a room, in any room really. When I walk in, I tend to take a look around the room to see where the exits are. I tend to to see what I can use as a weapon. I tend to use to look for things that are, where could I hide? And that's not normal. It's not normal. And I'm really affected by that. And, and the other thing too, and this is really not to be morbid, but I actually paid for my funeral because of all of this. My husband and I paid for our funerals because of this, because I thought, there's going to come a time where I'm not going to come home because of something like this. And I just, I couldn't just let things be. And so I that's why I joined, and I'm excited to be doing this. And I bring a different perspective to the group because I am not a mom. I'm an auntie, but I'm a mom of 18 years worth of education. So I have a lot of students that call me mom still, even though they're not my kids. So, yep.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think everyone kind of knows me for a lot of the environmental work that I do, but something that each of you said, I can pull out at least one thing that really resonated with me, because we can't talk about the climate crisis if we don't feel safe in our own communities, if we don't feel safe in our own schools, in our own grocery stores, in the movie theater. If we don't feel safe, and that is a direct need, then we can't get even deeper into other social issues, because it's kind of a gridlock issue that at the end of the day, you need to feel safe and excited for life in order to move forward and advocate for other things that truly matter. And I think especially when it comes to the PTSD that you brought up, it is really affecting our kids' mental health in so many ways. Danielle, when you brought up what you were talking about how you feel like you need to do something, there's so many people that feel like they don't even know where to start when it comes to these issues. They feel hopeless. They feel lost. They feel that PTSD without even having anyone in their lives directly affected by gun violence, and pretty much there's something out of everything that you all have said that on a personal note, I think most people watching this can understand. And it's really frustrating because, like you said, Fiona, it's so simple. It is so simple. There are so many easy, affordable ways to change the way that our country currently is. And unfortunately, when we talk about the way the system is influenced by the gun lobby, we're talking about outright corruption, and our democracy is going to be inevitably broken if the people who we elect to represent us choose to listen to corporate for-profit entities that are looking at their bottom line and their profits more so than looking at the lives of our own children. So maybe we can reflect together on some of those points, and maybe Linda, we can go back to you, like in the work that you're doing, where can we find progress?
We're really excited because just recently in Orange County and also in Seminole County, the school boards have decided to send out information to the parents that shows them how important it is to safely store their firearms. This will save many lives. This will reduce suicide rates. This will reduce children bringing guns to school. This will reduce what they call accidental shootings. We say there are no accidents because if you locked up your gun safely, there would be no accidents. So we are very excited about that. Seminole County already has theirs out on the website, and Orange County has a resolution. They will be doing that. Duval County, Alachua County, Broward County also have done this. So it's spreading, and we're very excited about that. But another new piece of news, exactly what you're just talking about, that we need to be watching for is we all feel as though the ROTC program is a very powerful program in our schools. But recently we found out that the NRA is starting to fund this program. This is an issue to us because there's not enough money in the schools so that they're going to get in through the ROTC program, which we know is a good program, but for them funding it is a little bit scary for us. So those are things that we are watching for directly in the school system now. As far as and Danielle can talk more about this because she has a young child in the school, but as far as the school drills is we really need to make it so it isn't so traumatic to the children. They need to know where to go. But Danielle, you want to take it from there on how it affects your child or what you feel like you've heard from other parents?
Yeah. So Andrea, is, her name is Andrea Halperin. She was the founder of our Orlando group after Pulse. And her daughter, she says she can trace where her anxiety came from to a drill. And what I think is just absolutely genius of her is that Ron DeSantis here in Florida has passed this law and legislation that parents who feel uncomfortable with something can opt their children out. And while his intention was not for this, what she has presented to the school board is, can we know when drills are going to happen and opt our children out of them? There's no evidence that shows that they work. In fact, it's the complete opposite. As Sonia mentioned, it's actually traumatizing our children and educators. So I think it's, we can get creative and kind of work around that and try to figure out a way to stop it. There's no proof that they work. So,
or even if they did the parental notification, then they could at least talk to their child what to expect, so they know where to go, they know what to do. But there needs to be something, because it is causing a lot of trauma in the children right now.
Yeah. Well, I want to make sure that we talk about the good policies that are actually being instilled across the state and on a local level. But before we get to that, I also want to hear from Fiona and Sonia too, like, what emotional pull do you think has brought you to this advocacy world? Because at the end of the day, I always wonder what it takes to get people to really freak out about an issue, right? Sandy Hook. I remember for the first time just falling to the floor, weeping about something that had absolutely nothing to do with me. But I think my brain at a certain point couldn't fathom what had happened. And, someone on this call already said, like, not one more. Like, I think it was Danielle, I want to do something because I cannot stand the idea of even one more happening. And now we've already had another mass shooting with tiny little children. I just, I feel like at a certain point, this movement is growing because people are just done. How do you all feel about the work that you're doing?
So I think, like we touched on earlier, I feel very hopeful the work that we have progressed in the last 10 years, especially, thinking back to Sandy Hook and, something that people say all the time, and I heard it again after the Uvalde shooting, is, as crass as it is, and as hard as it is for me to say this, but children were murdered, nobody cared, and then we all move on, and if nothing changed after that, nothing will. And it's just not true. After Sandy Hook, this movement was started. It's grown in 10 years. After we had, a huge wave of interest in our organization. We had, I want to say, 10,000 people ask for information in the state of Florida alone in the days after the Uvalde shooting. And there's a lot of movement, and sometimes this movement feels like you're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, or 1 step forward and 2 steps back sometimes. Something that happened in Florida after Parkland is that we passed a red flag law so that law enforcement can take weapons away from those who pose a threat to others. And we've been working to expand it, which has not been successful so far. But part of that law is the Guardian program, which allows for the arming of school staff. So it feels like there's baby steps, but we've changed, and we've changed. I think something we've talked about as well is changing the culture, and how it used to be a taboo subject to talk about guns, and now when my son goes to a play date, I ask, "Do you have a gun? And if you do, is it locked separate from ammunition?" And things like that used to be extremely taboo subjects, and we've completely shifted the culture little by little. And I see so much hope and so much engagement. So,
Thank you for sharing that. Sonia, did you want to add?
Yeah, well, you had mentioned, the sort of the pull that kind of draws us to this work. I will share a story, and I know that my student has allowed me to share this story. So this is completely, from her perspective. I have a student who graduated a couple of years ago who had returned from Christmas break, and we were sitting in my office, and I said to her, "You don't look like your normal self. You're not your bubbly self." I said, "Is everything okay?" And she said, "I guess it's okay." And I said, "Well, what's going on?" She said, "Well, my brother was killed." And I said, my instant reaction is, "Oh my gosh," but she said it so nonchalant. And she said, "Yeah, he was gunned down in front of my house. He died in the steps of my house." And I watched it. And here we are, just coming back from break. This had just happened within the past 2 weeks. And I, obviously cried with her, and we sat and talked about it. And, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't understand. How is this happening?" And she said, "Well, it's not like I'm not used to it. My sister was also killed 2 years ago, also in my neighborhood." And, I still get choked up about it, but, I don't have children, but those kids that I talk to on a regular basis and share their stories and are consistently dealing with gun violence in their neighborhoods. I joined because of Parkland. And then I soon found out that gun violence is something that happens every single day across the country, and more than 100 people die a day. And I didn't know that information, right? I didn't know that because I was in my bubble, and I have lived an extremely abundant and wonderful life so far, and I've never had to deal with gun violence. I'm grateful for that. But dealing with the students that I deal with, it became extremely apparent that this is their reality, day-to-day reality, shootings in their neighborhood where they can't sleep at night because, things like that happen. I used to work in an elementary school, and we had plenty of days where we were on lockdowns because there was a shooting in the neighborhood right that we were in. And the kids would talk about it like it was, like nothing. They were just living their life. And to me, that just didn't seem normal. I am so sorry. It didn't seem normal. And so, obviously it's not normal. But I learned that information being involved in this group, in this grassroots movement, where I feel like a lot of us who don't have to deal with stuff like this really are very ignorant on, right? Not to our own faults or anything, but it's just, that's not our daily lives. But so many communities are living with this every single day, and we're not addressing it. We're just really not addressing it. We like to talk about the big events. We like to talk about, the Parklands and the Uvaldes, which are absolutely awful and should never happen. But I feel like the other part of this it's really important is the kids that like Fiona and I work with on a consistent basis that really see this type of gun violence every day. So that has been my draw. That has been my absolute draw, because I could honestly be like, well, school shootings happen now. Oh, well, I'm a teacher. That's, these are the drills. I could easily have walked away from all that. But knowing how my students have been affected on a daily basis has really made me hold on and continue to do the work that we do. And I'm hopeful that things will be changing. But like Danielle says, we call it the losing cha-cha. It's just how it goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you can't just sit idle.
No.
You can't just sit idle and watch all of this happen and feel that hopelessness or powerlessness and then just succumb to it. I mean, I don't even know what that means. Sometimes you read these headlines or you see these videos, and now with social media, you can get right into the classroom with Uvalde and see what's happening. You cannot ignore it. And, I think other countries, and Fiona, I'd love for you to kind of chime in. Other countries are looking at America like, what the heck is going on? like for a first world country that has all these resources and all of this abundance, the fact that you guys can't get this simple thing under control, they must be laughing at us. Fiona, what's your experience in some of your personal pull?
Well, just in response to that, I was going to say, after the mosque shooting in Christchurch, New Zealand, within, a few days and within 2 weeks, they had banned assault weapons, which I didn't even know you could have an assault weapon down there. I knew you could have a hunting rifle because it's an agricultural, country. My issues are a lot like what Sonia was saying, and that's what I was going to say, is one of the things I think that's affected me the most is, I think I first read it, there's a book, Another Day in the Death of America, a chronicle of 10 short lives. And it talks about 10 children that were killed in a span of 24 hours in America. And the universal thing across that was Black mothers expected their children to die young, especially their sons. And that just shocked me. But I hear that over and over and over. And I also religiously listen to the Pivot podcast, which is 3 football players, African-American football players, who are professionals. And they bring on professional athletes that, usually came from rough backgrounds or tough backgrounds. And, now they're professional athletes, so they have a voice. But I hear the same thing, like Sonia said. They nonchalantly said, "Oh, in October, my brother was shot and killed on Halloween," and it's so shocking. And when I'm at the Boys and Girls Club, I look, because I work with little kids, 1st through 5th graders. I constantly look around, especially the little boys, and I think, which one of you is going to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? And we shouldn't think we shouldn't be thinking like that. We should be thinking, what opportunities does this child have, to have a great future? And instead I'm worried about them, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's the stuff that I think really, especially when you start working with, especially with African-American children and children in underserved communities, you just hearing those stories, it just breaks your heart, and it just makes you want to do, you want to save the world, but at least can we save one at a time? And it's the cycle and the intersection, I think, of, the gun violence with juvenile justice, with education. And to me, that's where my heart is. We have to make it better for these kids. We can't keep doing what we're doing. And I know we are making some progress, but now, we're talking about the Guardian plan is coming up again, and the Commission of Education has said wants a guardian or armed staff in every school, not every school, every county in Florida. We know that's not the answer.
Well, this is where I want to kind of segue into what policies have either been on the books to be championed or have already been going up to the state on a regular basis but have been knocked down. Mm-hmm. Or what do you think is in the works for good and for evil? DeSantis has already said that he wants to have permitless carry by the end of his time as governor. I know you all have said that there have been various policies that you've tried to champion, like the red flag laws and the expansion of that up through the state, that have failed in some cases, but sound like there are some champions at the state that might be willing to bring them forward. Who wants to chime in on kind of like where we are and where can we go from here on gun reform policies?
I guess I'll take it since I'm the legislative person. But absolutely on permitless carry. We've spoken to over, and I'm very proud of the moms across the state. We've spoken to over 50 legislators at the delegations just in the last month and talked about permitless carry. We did have someone talk in Seminole County right before me that said it's a God-given right that we do have permitless carry, and that kind of threw me a bit. But we are definitely talking. And on a very positive note, the sheriff in Broward County got up and spoke it was today. spoke today on how important it was to law enforcement. Sheriff Mina is behind us, definitely, but there are sheriffs who feel differently. So we are still working on that. He probably will pass it, but we are getting the information out there and educating people as to what it really means, because people don't understand. Gun owners, 83% of gun owners in America do not want permitless carry. And the statistics have shown 11 to 15% increase in homicides and violent crimes in states who have taken in permitless carry. But on the red flag law, a very positive is that in the United States now, firearm deaths in children is the number one cause of death. But in Florida, it's still number 2. The reason is red flag laws. So we just have to preach and preach and preach to the legislators that this is working, and we need to continue it, particularly with suicide. We need to be able to have loved ones say, my family member, my close friend needs this weapon taken away, at least for a short period of time until they are better, are treated. So that's positive. Another really exciting bill that we had last year, it didn't make it through committee, but not because it wasn't not because they didn't like it. It just got stuck because the head of the committee had other issues. And that's our Community Violence Intervention and Prevention Bill. We're very excited about that. It was a bipartisan bill. We hope that it can be a bipartisan bill this year again. And what it's going to do is put an office through the DCF that will give access to our grassroots programs, such as Las Amilas, such as Rue Camp, such as New Image Youth Center, all these wonderful small organizations that we have in our community that are actually the sneaks to the streets, that they would have access to federal funds, local funds, state funding, and also technical assistance. And Lee, you know this better than anybody else, because we know how much you've helped Seven with Las Amilas, is that they need to know, how do you do a 501c3? Why do I need a 501c3? And all of the things, how do you build a website? All of the things that are very important. And so that one, we've had pretty good response from a lot of the Republicans, and I think we can get that one passed if we just really educate everyone. The one that we have had for many years that has not gone is we want to repeal Stand Your Ground. We know what damage that's done, particularly in the communities of color, but that one, we tried to find out why they even started it. And it was probably because the senator at the time had some issues himself. And then Marion Hammer took it and ran it with it. But that one, I don't know that we'll get very far in the very near future, but we do push that one every year. Those are our 3 priorities. We do also, now that it's in Duval County and Dade County, increasing the guardianship program. We do want to work on that, and we're hoping that every town will give us the go to really push that one. So those are the priorities, good ones and ones that are kind of stuck that we just need to keep educating the public so that they can tell the legislators, we do not want this. We've talked to gun owners. They do not want permitless carry. That sheriff made the most beautiful speech saying how ridiculous it was to think you could hand somebody a gun and think they knew how to use it.
Right. I do not want people driving around without a license. So I don't want people walking around with a gun that they've never been trained on how to use it. And we can't really tie it back to them. Danielle, it sounds like you wanted to chime in on that.
Well, I didn't know if Linda made a comment the other day. We were talking about the Guardian program. I don't know if this is something she wants to talk about. But Linda made a comment that she knew her daughter would have been affected if her coach, I believe, had a gun. And I don't want to push you to talk about it if you don't want to, but I don't know if that's something you want to share and make it kind of bring it home.
My daughter was a difficult athlete. She was an incredible athlete, and she did frustrate her coaches many, many, many times. And, if I knew the coach had a gun, I would have been very fearful. Maybe I'm overreacting to that, but she did make those coaches extremely angry, and that would be very frightening to me. And the same with teachers. And that's why, again, having foster children with all of the ACEs conditions that they have, is that how quickly they can get angry and how quickly they can make their teachers angry. And we put a weapon in that picture, and we're not talking just foster kids. We're talking so many children out there. And then when they said, oh, let's just give them to coaches, then I'm like, oh, glory. No, please.
Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of a recipe for disaster. You know, we have a 9,000 person teacher shortage. So now they're kind of saying anybody can be a teacher. And then they're putting people who aren't trained properly in the classroom. And now they're saying we can give them guns. And then we are like one of the lowest states in the entire country for mental health resources and for access to therapy and healthcare. So when you just add all of these things, not to mention lack of affordable housing, when you have to keep food on the table, sometimes people have no other choice but to turn to, you know, illegitimate crimes in order to keep food on the table. Like it's like we're brewing in a recipe for disaster for the next mass shooting here in the state. And no one really cares because they're kind of listening to the gun lobby over the concerned parents and teachers that are on the front lines of a lot of these stories that see that things are getting hotter and hotter and hotter and tighter and more frustrating and more challenging to survive in these communities. And like you said, Linda, when you add guns to the mix, it can be really challenging. Sonia, you wanted to chime in on that?
Yeah. So I'm glad that Linda actually and Danielle kind of brought that up, because as a teacher, I can tell you that there have been many instances where I have had altercations with students, you know, whether it be super simple verbal, but because we have been in a state for so long of not teaching about emotional wellness, you know, and I believe that Orange County, and I don't know how other states or other counties do it because I've only worked for Orange County, but in Orange County a couple of years ago, you know, actually, I think after Parkland, there was also a big push to do a lot of mental health, you know, awareness and social emotional learning. And, you know, we have definitely found that a lot of our students and parents and teachers are all suffering from unresolved trauma, which is what Linda brought up, which is ACEs, you know, which is adverse childhood experiences for anyone who doesn't know that. And, you know, so you combine the ACEs without also talking about social emotional learning, where you teach our students from day one how to acknowledge your emotions, how to name them, how to process them, how to, you know, who to seek out for help, like all of those layers of things that really prevent the level of violence going from 0 to 100, right? So we're taking that part away. And then now we're talking about arming teachers. So we're literally, we're in a lose-lose situation, because now we're putting a weapon in a classroom. And I hope this doesn't happen, but I see the writing on the wall. We're putting a weapon in the classroom where you have, you know, in a typical classroom, 30 plus students, all with different personalities, all with different levels of maturity and emotional intelligence. And then you put in a teacher who is exhausted and tapped out, and also dealing with their own trauma, and also probably dealing with affordable housing and pay and, you know, probably their own children's trauma and, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
The Stop Woke Act,
yes,
and all these new policies that are coming in, putting more pressure in the classroom.
Let's not talk about the woke. Yeah. So, you know, you're talking about like all these different layers, right, of, you know, things that could potentially go wrong because you have all those layers, right, of things that people are dealing with. And now you're putting a weapon in a classroom. There are so many different variables that there are so many different things that could go wrong. And I don't care how many people tell me, well, it'll be locked behind a thing and it's going to, by the time, I don't want to hear any of those excuses, because I've been in a classroom. I know exactly what happens in a classroom. I actually taught culinary. I had knives in my classroom. And when I tell you that when we had things come up, I mean, those knives were put away, obviously, but my biggest fear was that somebody was going to grab a knife, and pull something out. And I mean, and you're talking about, that's actually, more of a reactionary thing. Now you're adding a totally different weapon into this. And, anybody could get hurt. Anybody could use a weapon, but adding a gun to the mix is just it's really going to make things even worse. And what is going to happen is you're going to have teachers who are extremely passionate and loyal to the system and want to truly help kids. They're going to give up and they're going to walk away, because at this point I have my life to take care of before anybody else's. Unfortunately, we're going to say enough is enough, and I'm walking away. And so, somebody like me who's been around for almost 20 years, I would hate to throw that all out the window, but I have to take care of myself first. And I don't want to put myself in a position where I'm in a classroom where a student might suddenly, lose their temper, or another teacher, or whatever the situation. So yeah, this is a multifaceted issue that needs multifaceted solutions. And that is definitely not one of them, to add a gun to the system.
I was going to say, just think about the situation that just happened with that 6-year-old that took a gun to school. Was that teacher? She had a gun. Would she have shot her 6-year-old student? I mean, that's what we're asking teachers to do, right? Is it because usually it is these mass shooters in the schools usually are students that come back, or ex-students or whatever. I mean, it's insanity. That's not the answer, and we know that it also, by putting guns in schools, it's going to affect, African American children and minority children the most also. So it's putting them at even more risk than they're already at. And that's not the answer.
Yeah, I don't see the legislators who are pushing for guns in the classroom really looking at the long-term consequences. I see them saying, look over here so that you don't look over here. When you think about some of the things that came out after Uvalde, people were saying, oh, we're giving all this money to put up art in the classroom, and we could be putting up ballistic blankets, and we could be doing this and security and that. And I'm just thinking, how much money and time would go into all of these Band-Aid solutions when we could very easily be passing rigorous policy like they have in Japan, like they have in other major countries that have been proven and tested to protect children and families. And instead, we're going to just throw everything at the wall, like spaghetti, like alphabet soup, just throw it all in there and see what comes of it. And quite frankly, have no data to back any of these things that they're proposing. What it is don't look at the actual problem. And I think there's also a layer of guilt for those who do maybe own guns. I mean, I know there are responsible gun owners that feel like, hey, I actually have been trained. I actually understand how to use this tool and many, weapons of war. And I don't want them in the classroom. I don't want them on the streets, and I don't want them to be easy to get. But then there are other people who own guns that for some reason, like you said, Linda, they're pushing this narrative of it's a God-given right to have access to a gun. It's almost propaganda that is kind of being force-fed down the throats of people who feel like they have something to fear. And the guns alone will make them safer, which is completely skewed and does not follow any direct data. Danielle, did you want to chime in on that?
You touched on how other countries have different laws that are stronger and effective, but I also want to say that other states do as well in our country. And so the data shows that states like Connecticut and California and other states that have really strong gun laws actually have less shootings. So the data is there to show, even within our own country, that we can strengthen things. And just kind of a little side note, everybody likes to say, like, look at Chicago. Chicago's really strong. Chicago is across the border from Illinois. It's a very, very short, Indiana, very short drive. And Indiana has extremely lax laws. So, the data is there to show that states with stronger laws have less violence. And then federally, we can put guardrails around that too. So, I think the data is there to strengthen our laws based not on other countries, but even our own states. And the other point that I kind of wanted to touch on is, saying like, people who are running for office are running on these bills and saying like, look over here, this is the shiny penny we're going to talk about. So you're avoiding out, what else is going on. I was really excited and heartened by the results of the election last year in 2022 and how Democrats in the party in power held that had never been held before. We held the House. We didn't hold the House. We held the Senate, which is massive. And I think a lot of the elections that we saw up and down the ballot, especially local races all over the country, are showing a sea change in calculus. And it kind of goes back to talking about how our culture has shifted. And I think part of gun violence, people being fed up with that as a country, has changed the culture and has led to a change in how we view politics. People are so much more engaged than they were. I'm more engaged than I ever used to be. So that's really heartening to see all that.
One thing I want to make very clear, no one is trying to take away people's guns. For some reason, that's the narrative that the other side uses. And I see this a lot in climate action. It's like, if you just ask for a tiny little step forward with progress, they act like we're going to ban airplanes and we're going to ban cars, and the liberal woke millennials are going to take away meat. It's like you just want to take the smallest little step towards accountability so that you can send your child to school without having a panic attack. Right. And they freak out like you are going to take away their rights, and then the whole Constitution is going to be thrown out the window.
Right. And it's such a slippery slope, that I feel like people try to capitalize on that. And, a lot of Moms Demand Action volunteers are gun owners. My husband's a gun owner. It's locked, it's put away. And when you tell people that, they're like, oh. So you're absolutely right. Like, we're not trying to take it away. We want you to be responsible. We want it to be locked up. We want you to pass a background check. If you have a history, if somebody has a history of domestic violence, then they shouldn't have a weapon in their home. Studies show that you're 5 times more likely to be murdered by your spouse in a domestic violence situation if there's a gun present. So it's just things like that we're trying to put fences around it. We're not trying to be a country with absolutely no guns. We understand that that's part of the culture, but we can be safer, right? So I couldn't agree more.
I'm really inspired by each of your stories because it sounds like you all have had experiences of fear and exposure to various traumas, but it doesn't sound like either of you have been necessarily directly impacted by gun violence. And I think that inspires me even more because everyone should care about this issue. And it's almost easier to say, well, my child will never, or my child's school, I pay for a really prestigious education, or, we go to a great school, we're in a great neighborhood, like this will never affect me. But I know from working with Commissioner Nicole Wilson that at various schools in Windermere, there were 3 suicides in 1 year. There were 2, at least in the first year I worked with her, 2 scares where they had to go into lockdown because there were guns at the schools. And this is a wealthy community and prestigious school that, and some of the suicides were some of the top students. So, I just hope that other people who are watching this that think that it's just communities of color and just communities that are, oppressed communities, that are really struggling financially and have lack of resources. It's every community. And it hits so close to everyone's home because you can go to a grocery store to just pick up eggs and get shot nowadays. And we just move on as a society and act like that's normal. And it's really not. It's women like you, it's individuals like you that are fighting towards seeing the smallest little bit of accountability every single step of the way until we have a safe country that are working so hard. So thank you all. In closing, did anyone want to share like what's next and where can we learn more if someone wants to join Moms Demand Action?
Well, I guess I'll take that one since I'm leading the group from this point forward. So what's next? Well, actually, before the pandemic, I think we were really strong in our numbers and we were doing great work. And we were really out there in the community all the time and involved. And then obviously the pandemic happened and it kind of brought everything to a halt. I will tell you that there are some ladies in this group, 2 of them are sitting in this room right now, who have continued to carry the torch consistently out in the community, still involved and still doing things, but probably not to the level of what we would like to have been doing. And obviously it was just limitations, right? However, so this year we are starting fresh. We are getting back to where we were. We are going to be back out in the community on a consistent basis because we know that, like you said, just like environmental issues, when you're involved in our communities and, doing the work that we do, which is honestly just showing up and people just want to be seen and heard. And I think that makes a huge difference. So by doing that, I think, we obviously prevent gun violence or at least help a little bit. So we're going to be back doing that. We have a Facebook group that it is closed, but you can ask to join. And our wonderful Danielle is an amazing person who, checks everyone in who wants to join our group. And so we have events coming up. We're probably going to be working on some domestic violence related events coming up. We have Walk a Mile in Her Shoes that happens downtown. We're going to be involved with that. We've got some other plans. We're not completely sure yet of everything that we're doing, but if people want to join, they just have to look for us on Facebook, or they can look on the momsdemandaction.org website, and they can look up for any events in their area. So they can type in the zip code and they usually pulls up list of events that they can join. Even if they're not necessarily local to Orlando, maybe you're visiting your auntie in California and you're like, you know what, this weekend I feel like doing something cool. You can look up an event nearby because I guarantee you there's a mom's event somewhere. So they can join us via Facebook. They can join us looking up the events online. And once they join our Facebook group, there's some information of meetings and things like that are going to be coming up. So I can't tell you exactly what yet because we're still in the midst of planning the year. But we're definitely going to get back to what we like to say, our roots, and being out in the community, doing some domestic violence prevention work, some cleanup of streets. We're very involved with Sevens Group. Obviously, Linda and Fiona do a lot with them. Our wonderful Angela is our community liaison, and she does a lot of work with our police department and some of our faith-based organizations. So, I tell you what, I always tell people, if you want something done, you just call up the moms. Because I'm going to tell you right now, we show up. We show up wherever. We show up in numbers. We show up wearing our red shirts. We show up. And as long as we know that we are needed, we're there. And so if there are events that honestly people want others, for us to be involved in, they just have to reach out, and we'll be there. Because like you said, even Lee, an environmental cause, we're out there. We could be out there with you. We don't mind at all, because it all affects gun violence. And, we're all in this to create a better world for the future, that's coming up for this, your generation, Lee, and the generations that are coming up, which your generation is my favorite generation of all, by the way, hands down. So, yeah.
I mean, thank you. I mean, it's a very real conversation that my fiance and I have to have. We saw extreme supply chain shortages happen with COVID, and we know that the climate crisis is going to slow down supply chains even more so with the wildfires, the droughts. Extreme weather is going to cause a lack of resources. And if you're in a state surrounded by guns and surrounded by people that feel emboldened to be aggressive because they have a governor who's airing that violence out and is actively having rallies where Nazi flags are seen, someone like me, a Puerto Rican Native American Cape Verdean woman who is very vocal about human rights issues, I could be a target, and I'm growing food on my property. We're already talking about getting cameras and getting a fence and, quite frankly, even maybe getting a gun to protect ourselves, because we're realizing that the world is changing and we're scared. And this is something that I legitimately have to have conversations with my family and with my fiance and about our future, about planning for our funeral, because I know the more vocal I am, the more that I am trying to get into the spotlight and be an inspiration to my peers, the more I have a target on my back and could be a victim of gun violence. It affects people in more ways than they even really stop to realize. And my generation and the next, we're seriously having to plan our futures out with these conversations. And it's sad because I know my parents and my grandparents didn't necessarily have to think about this. There was a civil rights movement. My grandma told me about how scary it was when Martin Luther King Jr. passed away. They were flipping cars and there were riots. But some of the things, she passed worried about me in more ways than she ever really worried about her children. So, I just thank you all for the work that you're doing, and thank you all for putting yourselves on the line. You're going to meetings, you're showing up to everything. And that is true because I see you all everywhere, school board meetings, Board of County Commission meetings, I see you. And this work needs to be done. And the more you grow your movement, the more you will not be ignored. So I'm so proud of you all. Anyone want to close out with any last comments?
I was just going to say, I think it would be remiss to say that we aren't excited that Maxwell Frost, who was a March for Our Lives organizer, has been elected the youngest, and he's amazing. And he reached out to us early in his campaign. And I think it's exciting to have somebody that has been on the ground in this organization, or not in our organization, but in this fight, and who really knows what he's doing. And hopefully he can, and his voice is strong, and maybe he can, light a fire and get things really moving. I
love Maxwell Alejandro Frost. He is so remarkable and basically the beacon of hope that I think came out of this election when here in the state of Florida, it kind of seemed like we were drowning in bigotry, and sadness, people that really didn't care and were just backed by FPL and all the major corporations that, don't have our interests as the residents in mind. But, we don't stop. We just keep pushing forward. And, the work that you all do is very inspiring. So thank you. And I can't wait to see you out and about in the community. And we'll be sharing all the websites and Facebook pages in the comments of this video. So thank you all, ladies, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lee. You're amazing. And I'm so excited that you are who you are, and can't wait to see what you do.
Yes.
From here on out. And you know what I like to say? I know we're saying goodbye, but I always like to say, we're the older folks. I'm a little bit older than what most people think. We're the older folks. We will stand holding you up, and whatever it is that you need, we will move things out of the way, because we do have privilege I'm a Latina woman, but I know that I have privilege. So whatever I can do as an older person, as a woman, we want to clear the way for you young folks to do your work, but just know that we are supporting you all.
Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Linda, Fiona, Danielle, and Sonia for making the time for this interview. I really appreciate everything that Moms Demand is doing, and I hope that after listening to the incredible advocacy work in order to fight for the necessary gun reform that we're looking for, that you too will stay interested, stay asking questions, and work with Moms Demand. You can go to their website for more resources at www.momsdemandaction.org. Feel free to reach out, and we'll make sure to put all their contact information in the comments below. And thank you so much for your willingness to make the time to learn about this really deep subject today.